Hi guys, and welcome back to Chaos Head Noah. So, yeah, we're on chapter 8 now. Uh, yeah, Nanami. So, I've thought about it, and I think it's possible that, maybe the bandage on her wrist is just an injury from someone stealing her bracelet and phone or whatever. And the more I think about it, if her hand was amputated and then put back on, she probably wouldn't just be casually fiddling with her hair or just using her hand or whatever. If my hand got lopped off and then put back on, I would be using that thing I wouldn't be using that thing, and I would treat it like a freaking piece of porcelain or something. At least until it completely heals up. Another thing is, if she's at school and she had her hand lopped off, then she's back pretty early. So, while I think it's possible she may have been hurt somehow, I also don't think that what Takami's thinking is necessarily what actually happened. Now, as for Norose, yeah, somebody was there in the dark with him. Somebody. So there was a ghetto froggy on the table there, and the only people we know who have that are Nanami, Takumi, and Hiwa. Now the thing is, we haven't seen Nanami's phone since the box left Takumi's shipping container. So I suppose it's possible that that's just an implication that Norose was the one behind the kidnapping, for example. But, yeah, somebody was there in the dark with him, so I suppose it's possible that the Garo Froggy belonged to them. But, yeah, the implication seems to be that whoever's in the dark is somebody that's a gigolomaniac that we don't know about being a gigolomaniac. And so, with Nanami and Yua, yeah, if either of them are, then we don't know. What I am thinking about, though, is that back when Takumi was first back when Takumi first met Rimi and all, he seemed to have one of those moments where he thought he was thinking, but he was actually talking out loud. But, with how CoZ is and all, the implication seems to be that gigolomaniacs can hear other people's thoughts if they want to. Or at least that's my understanding. The whole Derek C thing is a lot to wrap your mind around. I'm sure I'll get a better understanding of it as time goes on, especially if the concept returns in Chaos Child. But, yeah, I think. We know. Well, pretty sure we know that Rimi is a gigolomaniac because of the opening of this game where we saw she had a D sword, but more like a bow, I think. Kind of looked more like a bow, maybe just a weird double-edged sword or something. I don't know. But, yeah, that's enough spitballing for now, I guess. I'll just carry on, but yep, super intrigued to see where this goes. Initiated by Momose, a meeting was slated to be held at Frisia Credit Bureau, a meeting to which was now running nearly half an hour late. Momose's angry voice hurtled into him as he entered the office. In response to this, Bon gave a minor shrug, then proceeded to walk up to the desk of Frisia's president with an amiable smile on his face. He had not brought any refreshments today, something he was beginning to believe may have been a lapse in judgment.
あら、つばちゃんは？
今日は別行動。
若い子をこき使って、バンちゃんは楽してるわけね。
いやいや、俺もちゃんとやってるよ。昨日だって徹夜でいろいろ調べてたんだぜ。おかげで最近の女子高生の生態についてはかなり詳しくなった。
あんたね、呆れて物も言えないわ。
Well, high school girls seem to be the main subject of this game, after all.
で、こうして俺を呼びつけたってことは、あの子と連絡取れたってこと？
今来てるわ。
The kid.
ちなみに、可愛い子かい
Momose promptly smacked Bon over the head, stopping his opportunistic grin in its tracks. The sheer speed with which she had turned her wrist made the slap especially fierce. You're mine!
いつまでもバカなこと言ってんじゃないわよ、エロ親父。
冗談だって。
Before arriving at the building, Bon had made a private request to Momose. It entailed setting up a meeting between him and a certain person connected to the New Gen cases. Rather than anything work-related, it was merely to satiate a personal curiosity. He was not planning on talking about anything related to the New Gen investigations for the time being. And due to his position, Bond could not simply meet with the person on his own, else he would risk drawing the ire of the detectives he was getting ahead of. Who is it? Momose urged Bon over to a corner of the office. It was a fairly cramped space, almost all of which was already taken up by shelves packed full of files. The location was used as a reception area of sorts, and a pair of love seats had been wedged into the only place they could fit. Bon entered the section after Momose, and his eyes landed upon a lone girl sitting on one of the love seats. The girl was wearing a Suime Academy uniform. Her head and shoulders were curved toward the ground, and she looked incredibly haggard.
ごめんね。お待たせしちゃって。
Yep. The girl looked up in startlement upon hearing Momose. In the process, her glasses had slipped down her nose a bit, leading her to swiftly readjust them with her finger.
いえ、平気です。
When she saw Bon, her expression turned slightly fearful, before bowing her head in greeting a moment later. Bon felt somewhat hurt by this. He'd made every attempt to look as non-threatening as possible in both bearing and appearance, but the girl's reaction made him realize that, despite his best efforts, the ferocity and intimidation particular to detectives was seeping out all the time. "Sir, you look like a bag of Five Guys French fries." Looks like I've still got a lot more practicing to do, he thought with bitter amusement as he sat across from Yua.
楠木優愛さんだね。
はい。
亡くなった美和さんの双子の姉。それで間違いないかな。
Twin sister. Yua slightly adjusted her posture, then returned a nod. The first New Gen incident, the group dive. Among the 5 high schoolers that had leapt to their death was a girl named Kusunoki Miya. Yeah, I figured she probably had someone who died in one of the incidents, judging by how she was acting.
まあ、そんな緊張しなさんな。 君を取り調べようなんて思っちゃねえんだ。雑談程度に思ってよ。
Especially a twin sister. You would think Takumi would have noticed that one of the girls on in the group dive looked exactly like Yua.
本題に入る前にちょっと聞いていいかい？ゆあちゃんは妹さんが亡くなったことについてどう思う？
ちょっとバンちゃん。
あ、悪いね。職業病ってやつか。気を使うような言い方できなくってな。ただ気になってたんだ。捜査本部でも話題になってたんだが、楠木美也さんの遺族は奇妙だって。
ばあちゃん。
いえ、いいんです。
Before Momose could rise to her feet over Bond's insensitive comment, Yua stopped her.
私もおかしいって思いますから。
ああ。
集団ライブで飛び降りた5人には自殺する理由なんてなかった。家族や友人はみんなそう主張している。だがミヤさんの家族だけは違った。
Bond took his fan out from his belt and began cooling himself.
何も主張しなかった。あっさり受け入れたって聞いてる。あまりに何も言わなさすぎて奇妙だったってな。
Man's so hot he's gotta cool himself off constantly. That's the appeal of the DILF.
なんでだい？
お父さんもお母さんもミヤちゃんが死んでからおかしくなっちゃったんです。
Anguish seeped from Yua's voice.
最初はミヤちゃんの事件の知らせを受けた日はそれでも泣いていたんです。お父さんもお母さんもとても辛そうでした。でも次の日の朝、なぜか2人は楽しそうに笑っていたんです。ミヤちゃんが死ぬ前と全く同じに戻ってたんです。たった1日で。私、わけがわからなくて、2人はミヤちゃんのこと忘れようとしてるんじゃないかって思って。そうしたらお父さんが笑いながら「お前に妹なんていないよ」って。ミヤちゃんが残した洋服とか靴とかを見せても全然取り合ってくれないんです。それはお前のために予備で買ってあったものだって。そうやってお父さんたちはニュースからも警察の話からも目を背けて記憶からミヤちゃんのことを消し去ろうとしてるんです。
つまり双子じゃなかったことに。
それで警察にもうちは一人っ子だって言って追い返してたわけか。
私とミヤちゃんは一卵性で見た目は瓜二つなんですけど、あの子は妹は親から嫌われていました。あの子はいつも自分の気持ちを押し殺して私のことを一番に考えてくれていたんです。
As Yua spoke, memories from when Mia had still been alive resurfaced in her mind. First came a memory from when the two had still been in elementary school. One day, some relatives had brought the girls a single large teddy bear as a present. In contrast to the raw joy Yua displayed, Mia insisted that she did not like stuffed animals, and proceeded to not even so much as look the plush's way. Both her relatives and parents were upset with Mia for not acting as a child should. But despite Mia's protesting, Yua whispered to her that the two of them could share it, that it could be something they could both treasure. However, in response to her sister's kindness, Mia simply said that she did not want it, and that Yua could have it. About a month later, when Yua had grown tired of the teddy bear, she woke up in the night and happened to witness a certain scene. With an incredibly joyful look on her face, Mia was hugging and talking to the teddy bear plushie. That was the first time Yua had ever seen her sister so happy. And from this, she realized that her sister's insistence about disliking stuffed animals had been a lie. So, we seemed to be talking about how, well, I mean, it seemed like we were implying from how Yua was acting that she may have a split personality. And, like, she seems to go between this bubbly kind of ditzy girl to a stoic hardcore girl. And she had a twin sister who, while she was bright and happy, Mia was again seemingly dark and stoic. Her parents seemed to be insisting that she never had a sister in the first place. But from how the police are talking, it seems like there were public records of Mia existing. Yeah, something's weird here. It can't just be as simple as she had a split personality, because, like, I mean, I suppose it's possible that Kusunoki Mia was her legal name, and they only learned about Kusunoki Yua when I met her, but yeah, not sure. But I think this probably ties into Yua's seeming DID somehow. Somehow it ties into it, I imagine. And while Yua was asleep, Mia was acting bright and happy. And from this, she realized that her sister's insistence about disliking stuffed animals had been a lie. Mia had been keeping her own feelings hidden, all for the sake of her older sister. The next day, Yua found a lovely drawing of a bear beneath Mia's pillow. Until her sister had grown tired of the teddy bear, Mia had been hugging and sleeping with the drawing in lieu of it. Things very similar to this happened again and again all over the 18 years they spent together. For their birthday celebrations, Yua always blew out the candles on the cake, but when Mia was prompted to do it, she would say, "I refuse to do something so ridiculous," angering her parents. Yua advanced the private high school Suime Academy. Mia, meanwhile, had been misbehaving at school, deliberately scoring low on exams, and therefore moved on to a public high school. Due to the exorbitant fees, their parents would have only been able to afford to send one of them to a private school. So only one of them was going to a school as well. No matter how hard Yua tried to let her sister have something, Mia would always gain the upper hand and force Yua to be prioritized. To achieve this end, she even intentionally took a dislikable attitude.
私は結局ミヤちゃんの優しさに甘えて今まで自分だけいい思いをしてきました。
Yeah, like I think like some it's obvious what this ties into. I'm just like not sure what like the true nature of the situation is. Like you deluding Mia into becoming a physical person somehow? Maybe? He's like, I'm totally expecting that somebody in this game is gonna be like somebody who was deluded into reality. Like they weren't a real person until somebody else thought them up. Hmm.
ミヤちゃんがいなくなって初めてもっとあの子のために何かできることがあったはずだってすごく後悔して私が代わりに死んであげればよかったしかも挙句に親に存在そのものを忘れられてしまうなんて
Also, wait. Exorbitant fees for a public school? What the hell is wrong with you, Japan? Actually, like, I actually don't know. Is it, like, do most public schools have free enrollment, or is there, like, a fee? I'm not sure as a parent. I'm not saying I'm a parent. I'm saying I don't have the perspective of a parent.
こんなのあんまりですあんまりにも悲しいです
Man, her voice cracked there. You, having now reached her limit, can no longer squeeze out any more words. She took off her glasses, pressed her fingers against the corner of her eyes, and broke down in tears. Momose sat down beside her and gently rubbed her back.
それでゆあちゃんは一人で事件のことを調べていたらしいの。
That she has.
ミアちゃんに一体何があったのか知るためにね。
そりゃ大変だったろ。
そして一人の人物を突き止めた。
As Momose held Yua's shoulders, she turned her eyes toward Bon.
西条匠くんよ。
なるほどね。
Stroking the stubble on his chin, Bon leaned forward from the sofa.
いつだったか西条と追跡劇をしてたっていう女子高生の話を所轄のデカから聞いたんだが、もしかしてユアちゃんだったりする？
Yua nodded apologetically.
興味あるな。詳しく聞かせてもおうと思ったけどちょっとごめんよ。
With a strained smile, Bon lightly bowed his head to Yua and Momose. His words had been interrupted by the cell phone in his suit pocket. He swiftly took out the phone and checked the screen. Suwa's name was displayed across it.
もしもし、どうした？
先輩、7番目っす。
なんだと？
What? Already? Suwa's voice sounds strained. The sounds of investigators frantically scurrying about could be heard through the phone. Suwa must have been at the investigation headquarters.
ニュージェネ第7の事件が起きたんすよ。
Well, damn. Bon's eyes opened wide, and his expression turned bitter as his teeth sank into his lip. Sensing the seriousness of the situation from his behavior, Momose and Yua watched the detective with unease.
ガイシャは3人、友人同士らしいっす。
Oh. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, boy. Kozue and Takumi are in a lot of trouble. We saw from how those guys were talking that they had been in contact with Shogun, and assuming Shogun is indeed the new Gen Killer, then yeah, he did have access to them.
さっきとも胴体から体が切断されてて
Interesting. Interesting. So somebody went back and finished the job, apparently. Or is it possible that they had actually been dying or dead and Kozue just lied about it? Whether she or Takumi did it in that case, I wouldn't know, but like, we seem to be keeping that ambiguous, which kind of tells me it very possibly could have been Takumi.
それぞれの上半身と下半身を別々に入れ替えてテグススリトスでそれで取り付けられてたんです
Okay, yeah, no. Yeah, somebody went and finished them off.
それと左にそれぞれ Q、D、L って読める傷が
Dokyun! Oh, this is very, very interesting indeed. Dokyun.
何かのメッセージか
Dokyun!
そこまではそれと気になることが司法解剖の結果分かったんですけど外車の胴体の切断部はノコギリとか包丁とかそういう刃物で切断されたものじゃないって
どういう意味だ
なんか強い力で引きちぎられたそうっす
Yep, a D-sword. Murder weapon was a D-sword. I mean, this doesn't necessarily mean that... Yeah, this doesn't necessarily mean that Takumi or Kozue was the culprit there. Just... somebody with a D-sword is the killer. Supposedly the new Gen Killer in this case. I mean... If I recall correctly, Shogun said that he didn't have a D-sword of his own. Which means that, yeah. In that case, I'm guessing the killer here is whoever NoAH was talking to. Since he identified them as a gigolomaniac, but they seemed to be keeping that secret for some reason. Bond repeated Sua's words back to him with a low groan, then roughly scratched his head with the handle of his fan.
まるで怪獣だな。あるいは最近流行りの魔法使いとかな。
先輩それマジで言ってんすか映画オタクの自分でもさすがにその意見には同意しかねるっす
単なる例えだバカな。映画らさっさと捜査に戻れ。
After barking that order to Sua, Bond ended the call. What kind of pun are they gonna come up with this time? Ass backwards? Now that it was November, I had a feeling that the sun was already setting much earlier than before. By the time Remy and I started heading home together after school, a faint orange was already staining the sky.
ごめんね。
Despite being silent up until now, Remy abruptly apologized.
たく、いろいろ大変だったんでしょ。
It was the first time I'd gone home with Remy in a while. I was genuinely really happy that she'd come back. She'd even been the one to initiate it, saying, let's walk home together. Since we'd only gone home together no more than twice, I'd secretly been worried that it would never happen again. However, that turned out not to be the
一
case.
緒にいてあげられなくてごめん。
You're feeding into his dependency on you a little too much, Remy.
知り合いが例の地震で怪我しちゃって。
Did they now?
ずっと面倒見てたから。
And I've been taking care of them ever since. She did go to visit Shogun in the hospital. Even though I hadn't asked, Rimi was kind enough to explain herself to me. Though to be frank, almost all of Rimi's words were going in one ear and out the other. I think what probably actually happened is that she was getting cold feet about Dream talking to me like this and cut off contact with him. But yeah, Shogun has sent her back. The bandage I'd seen on Nanami's wrist at lunch break. It'd been burned in my eyes and refused to go away.
もしかして怒ってる？
In the end, I'd failed to say anything to Nanami. I'd been too scared. Even though Nanami was my little sister. Even though I was Nanami's older brother. Something had just felt unbelievably strange. I had no idea what it was. The nurse said that Nanami had no injuries. That hand that Shogun had delivered to my base had disappeared from the fridge without a trace. Yes, because he put it there, he took it out, and then he put it in the finger food victim. Comprehend it, Takumi. Please, I beg you. It all had to have been a delusion. But if that was true, why had Nanami's right wrist been wrapped in a bandage? Though it's possible that I was just overthinking it, and that she'd just gotten burned or stung or got some other stupid minor injury that didn't matter at all. Yeah, that was probably it. That was the most logical answer. But even now, I was still too scared to check. Even after failing to save her, I was still just pacing around doing nothing. Not even trying to talk to her. My very own sister. I really was the worst brother ever.
ねえタク、おい、もしもし。怒ってるならそう言ってよ。無視されるのって結構傷ついちゃうな。
Says you.
え？
I looked over at Rimi, who seemed weirdly disheartened.
あ、え？
もしかして私の話聞いてなかった？
After hesitating for a second, I nodded. And the moment I did, Rimi jabbed my cheek with her forefinger.
石、てっきり無視されたかと思ったよ。紛らわしいことしない。
Again, says you. Oh, you just jabbed your nail into my cheek.
あ、大丈夫？
Rimi finally stopped poking me, and out came those words I heard so often from her. Words of worry and concern. Words that I'd hear from Rimi again and again.
お昼ぐらいから顔色良くないよ。元気もないみたいだし。もしかして誰かにひどいこと言われた？
You could say that. You could very much say... You could very much say that. You probably should know, what exactly happened there. Actually, she's probably just playing dumb.
だったら私に教えて。怒ってきてあげるから。
She was acting like an older sister, or a guardian even. Rimi was just a hopeless meddler. Well, that had been obvious from the moment she'd given a no-talker freak like me the time of day. I was grateful to her for being worried about me. Before now, I'd either bottled up my worries deep inside, or posted them anonymously on that channel. Should I tell her about what happened with Nanami? When I told her about the D-sword that one time, she hadn't believed me at all. Then again, that would just be the natural response from anyone sane. So if I were to tell her about Nanami, she'd probably either A, be speechless, or B, just laugh in my face. And if that was true, then there was really no point in telling her. All I needed was for her to stay by my side. It would be better to bring up the topic up with Kozupi or Senna instead. Mere moments after stepping foot into my base, Rimi muttered that in exasperation. And yet, paradoxically, she seemed to be smiling happily as well. Weird.
変わってないな。この部屋の汚さがまさにタクって感じ。
If you're gonna be like that, then just clean it. Be my guest. With a sigh, I turned on my PC.
ちょっと帰ってくるなりパソコン。友達が来てるんだから少しはおもてなししてあげようっていう気持ちにはならないのかな。ねえ、お話ししようよ。
Whoosh! Delude. Delude. Delude or delude? What will you choose? Okay, positive. After hitting me with such an unreasonable demand, Rimi sat down on the sofa. If I tried to have a one-on-one conversation with a 3D girl, it would be over in seconds. As much as I'd gotten used to talking with Rimi, since I'd had a lot more chances to do so recently, I still doubted I'd even last 5 minutes. That sentence is true in multiple contexts for Takumi. However, my head was already fully occupied with the stuff about Nanami, so I very much didn't feel up for a casual conversation. And so, I resorted to just ignoring her. I sat down in my chair, all while remaining painfully aware of my own worthlessness. Whoosh! I sensed Rimi moving behind me. The rustling of her clothes was growing closer.
だから無視しないでよ。
Daw. Takumi's eyes look a little goofy there, but daw. Oh, and hey, we're seeing his face again. The second time. I guess this is just going to be a frequent occurrence now. For I had the chance to turn around. I was embraced from behind. Seraton NTR. A gentle floral scent hit me. My back was struck by the soft sensation of Rimi's breasts. Why do I keep pausing to read these? Like, I know by now to expect it. It's Takumi. It's Takumi. Stop getting shocked. This isn't a new level of low for him. Ugh.
寂しいよ。そういうことされると。
I must have been running away from reality again, giving myself a delusion that was a lot easier to swallow than the real world. Upon thinking that, the sheer emptiness I felt overpowered any lust I may have had, and I was no longer able to enjoy the delusion anymore. Rather than taking her and pinning her down on the bed, I decided to throw out all the things that I could have only voiced in a delusion such as this.
僕だって寂しかった。辛かったんだ。リミがこの1週間全然連絡くれなくて。
I could feel the movement of Rimi's body directly against my back. Her chest faintly rose and fell with every breath. As obvious as the fact may have been, it reminded me that Rimi was truly alive.
ごめん。一緒にいてあげられなくてごめん。
You know, the CG would be even better if we got rid of a certain figurine in the foreground. Rimi tightened her embrace around me.
私の中でもまだ迷いがあって、どうしたらいいかわからなくて、ちょっと考えてみようと思って。
Doubts? Like what? What could she have been talking about?
そもそも私、タクと一緒にいていいのかなとか、このままの関係を続けるべきなのかなとか。でもね、このままじゃきっとダメなんだ。それじゃ何も救えない。
Okay, yeah, this is... yeah. Takumi seems to think this is a delusion, but this seems like it's actually happening. Like, from what we know of Rimi, like, this seems to apply to whatever's going on with her and Shogun. So, like, yeah. What? Would neither have been an actual delusion or something? Like, what?
ねえ、タク。私が最初に願ったのはさ、一つだけだった。なのにどうして人は、私は際限なく望み続けちゃうんだろうね。あの空を見つけた時に、私は。
That sky! That blue sky! I had no idea what Rimi was talking about, nor did I know how to respond to it. Silence enveloped us. I could hear Rimi's gentle breaths close to my ear. But no matter how long I waited for her to end it with some silly punchline, none ever came in the wafting silence. Was it possible that this wasn't a delusion? The moment I considered that, a wave of anxiety ran through me. In reality, Rimi was hugging me. She was pressing tightly against me. That realization alone nearly destroyed any sense of reason I had. I had a feeling that in a situation like this, if I pinned Rimi to the bed, she'd let me have my way with her. With a gulp, I...
メールだよ、ボケナス。
Takumi, come on. Come on.
今の何？
Rimi let go of me and... Yep, it indeed happened. Very interesting. So yeah, we finally seemed to answer that question for once. Like, stuff Takumi convinced himself was a delusion may have actually indeed been what happened. Make the positive out of the negative. Yeah, what would have happened if I picked neutral? Huh. Rimi let go of me in surprise, and the tender sensation vanished along with her. A complicated mix of both relief and disappointment spread throughout my chest. Wait a second. Amy had just heard my Seraton notification tone. Oh god, how embarrassing. When I opened my email software, I saw about 3 messages from Grim telling me to join the chat room. Now that I thought about it, I hadn't really chatted much with Grim recently. We used to talk online pretty much every day. But since I'd been refraining from playing ESL, it'd been about 10 weeks since we last... About 10 days! Not 10 weeks, 10 days. Since we last talked. Yo. Hey, Nighthawk-kun. I've been waiting for you. Because there's another new gen. ASCII art. A picture drawn on an online forum using only the characters and symbols included in the ASCII character set. Also known as text-based art. A little late to be giving us this, but okay. What are you even on about? Insert ASCII art here. New gen, dude. Whoops. New gen, dude. What the fuck do you think I'm on about? How exactly did we go from new gen to new gen? New generation. New gen. New gen. Nude gen. Come on, that shit's obvious. Use more common sense, FFS. More importantly, there's a 7th case.
どうしたの?
Likely not having noticed my gasp, Remy stood up and walked over to me. She peeked over my shoulder at the monitor.
第7の事件。
It happened again. Another new gen. How long was this damn thing gonna go on for? Was I next? Would I be the victim of the 8th case? The 9th?
タク、気にすることないよ。何も怖いことなんてない。タクは狙われたりなんかしない。
You were literally talking about erasing him, Shogun, so I don't know. Also, you kind of stabbed him in the beginning of the game, seemingly. You've got some complicated emotions, girl.
全部タクの被害妄想。ね。
Don't gaslight me! I know I'm in danger! That was completely baseless encouragement. You can't calm me down with such weak sauce shit, Remy. Anxiety aside, Remy was pretty much the new gen news guy at this point. He'd been keeping me in the loop about basically everything. I'm still waiting for the reveal that, like, Grim was the alternate account of Shogun or Misume or something. Maybe he's Norose. Even now, he was going out of his way to link a bunch of blog posts and news articles about it. Seemed like he really wanted me to take a look. Biting my lip, I reluctantly clicked the first link. Oh yeah, this particular case is gonna... Yep. I assume they're gonna... Yeah, okay. 7th New Gen case, dubbed the Dokyun Puzzle. On November 4th at approximately 4:50 a.m., the bodies of 3 men were discovered hanging from an iron pole near a railroad in Shibuya, Tokyo. The deceased have been identified as 19-year-old Fujita Kohei, unemployed, 20-year-old Anzawa Saburo, a college student, and 19-year-old Takagi Ryo, a construction worker. According to the police, the bodies were severed in half at the waist, but the wounds do not indicate the use of any sharp weaponry. Furthermore, the bottom halves of each of the bodies were interchanged with one another, forming new combinations which were tightly sewn back together with thread. Carved into each body were the letters D, Q, and N, respectively. The police are investigating the possibility that this may be a message left behind by the culprit. On the popular anonymous online message board, @channel, and some images of the incident were leaked prior to the official coverage of the events. It has already been accepted as the 7th case of the New Generation Madness, aka New Gen, as it was christened the Dokyun Puzzle, due to the manner in which the top and bottom halves of the corpses were recombined. Notably, on @channel, the term Dokyun means an individual lacking basic common sense. Like you. Regarding the serial New Gen cases, the mourning families of the victims have been taking legal action against some particularly offensive posts on @channel, a move which has sparked fierce debate online. Related articles: interview with Yuri Brightman, UBC Television, USA. 1,000 calls about Espra Boy flooding overnight. His body was glowing. Mysterious eyewitness testimony you won't see on TV. Japan's fake Espra Boy tops Mewtwo viewership ranking. No Gen burnt the wheat. Wait, it says Dokyun? LMAO, literally zero connection to the other cases. Police are dumb as fuck, ROFL. You trying to say it's one of us anti-Dokyuns? With their lower bodies swapped around and shit. It's like a puzzle, with corpses. If only I could trade in my upper body for some alphas, LMAO. Our Espra Boy Nishijo'll snip out the purpose anytime now, lol. Dokyun Puzzle. New Gen News better!
今日午前4時50分頃、東京都渋谷区の線路沿いで男性3人の他殺死体が鉄柱に吊り下げられているのを通りかかった新聞販売員の男性が発見しました。
Yep, this definitely happened after the fact.
警察の調べによりますと、殺されたのはいずれも渋谷区に住む無職藤田康平さん、大学生の安沢三郎さん、とび職の高木亮さんの3人です。3人とも胴体の部分が切断され、それぞれの上半身と下半身が別々に入れ替えられて糸で縫合されていました。
Dude, can you take off my torso, will ya? I can't do this. Stitch it back onto me. Now get yours off of me. Yeah, I'm actually okay with this. Mine was a bit small anyways.
3人の額にはそれぞれ謎の傷がつけられており、警察では犯人からのメッセージではないかとみて調べています。渋谷では2ヶ月ほど前から猟奇殺人事件が頻発しており、警察では今回の事件も同一犯による犯行の可能性が高いとみて捜査を続けています。
At the end of the news clip, photographs of the 3 victims were shown. I'd seen those faces before.
あいつらだ。
知ってるの？
昨日僕に絡んできた。
I'd given them my wallet, but they kicked my ass anyways. I'd then fallen unconscious, and when I woke up, CoZ was beside me. The 3 of them had been collapsed on the ground, covered in blood. I dug my wallet out from my pocket and stared at it intently. When I came to, CoZ had been carrying it, and she'd given it back to me soon after. Could the person who'd killed those 3 be? Hey man, just because she's a homicidal maniac doesn't mean that she did this homicide.
No, definitely not. The last time I'd seen them, they had been beaten to a pulp and covered in blood, but they hadn't been cut in half or anything. Which would mean they'd been killed after CoZ and I had left. It had to have been Shogun. That rankling asshole was trying to provoke me. Damn it, he really was committed to driving me insane. Just how far was he willing to go? I wanted to vomit. I clutched my stomach as it churned in pain. Was I next? Would I be next to die?
終了。
A hand reached out from behind me and pushed the power button on the monitor. The screen went pitch black.
落ち着いて。気にすることないよ。ただの偶然だって、きっと。
Sure.
Why was Rimi acting so ridiculously optimistic? This couldn't possibly just be a series of coincidences.
それより、お腹空いちゃった。ねえ、私が行きつけのお店があるんだけど、そこにご飯食べに行かない？安くて美味しいんだよ。私が保証する。まあ、お客さんはおじさんが多いから、私みたいのが一人で行くのはちょっと恥ずかしいけどね。あ、それと、駅の中に入らなくちゃいけないんだった。渋谷駅の構内にあるから。ちなみに、山手線内回りと外回りのホーム、どっちにもあるんだけど、私は断然内回りの方が好き。
Food, huh? I really didn't have much of an appetite right now. It felt like Shogun was holding a knife straight to my throat. Like he was saying, I can kill you whenever I please. Please, just let me go. What had I done to deserve this? I couldn't take it anymore.
Whoosh. Whoosh. That is a sword. It is Ayase sword. Kishimoto Ayase was lying in a hospital bed, idly gazing out the window. No bars lined the outside of it, in fact. A fact which set it apart from those at Arkhart Medical, where Ayase had been stayed in the past. All that stood out past the window's frame was the landscape of Shinjuku, decorated by skyscrapers and illuminated by the sunset. Flocks of pigeons soared freely throughout the sky, flapping their wings to their heart's content. Every now and then she would gaze upon the sight with a pained expression. Her slightly tired eyes were empty and bleak. Her irises reflected nothing. Her lips, which could let flow a voice so beautiful it shook the youth of Shibuya, were now sealed tight. Not even so much as a hum escaped from them. Following her suicide attempt, an event which caused quite the turmoil, she'd been admitted to the psychiatric ward of a large hospital in Yoyogi. Her injuries were already nearly healed. According to the doctors, it had been nothing short of a miracle that she'd been able to survive a fall from that height, let alone with barely even a scratch. However, she had indeed hit her head fairly hard, and as such she had been rushed to the hospital, primarily so they could see how the situation would develop. It had already been over a week since then. However, despite having been admitted for such a reason, all it seemed to entail was a few rudimentary tests taken every couple of days or so. Beyond that, she had been rather neglected. Her hospital room was private, with no other beds inside it. Ever since her stay had begun, her D-sword had been leaning against the window. It constantly emitted a blue light, yet nobody who visited her ever seemed to notice. Not that there had been many visitors to begin with. Phantasm fans would attempt to force their way into her room daily, but as they always caused a disturbance in the process, the hospital had an excuse to forbid them from visiting her. And since Ayase was somewhat detached from her family, there were almost no others who came to visit her. Her fellow band members had made an appearance once, but Ayase used that opportunity to announce her decision for the band to break up. They had not contacted her again since. You sure get around a lot. A nurse wearing white scrubs opened the door to the room, then swiftly entered. I don't trust you. Ayase slowly turned to look at the nurse's face, then took out the thermometer that had been resting under her arm. It was as if she only just remembered its presence. The nurse took a look at the recorded temperature shown on the digital screen, then took note of it on the clipboard she had brought with her.
37度1分とちょっと熱っぽいかしら。ズキズキするわ頭。
Ayase grimaced in pain once more.
あら、また頭痛？でもそれは薬の副作用よ。気にしなくてもそのうち良くなりますよ。
Having recorded her temperature, the nurse consoled Ayase with a kind smile. Her expression was so gentle, it was clear to all how she was able to put her patients at ease. And yet, despite the nurse's attempts, Ayase simply pushed her hand against her forehead as she shook it back and forth. Ayase had been plagued by mild headaches ever since she had first been hospitalized. They were not especially painful, but they still left her with an uncomfortable feeling that refused to go away. One that felt as if her brain itself was convulsing. It even reached the point where her ability to think was impaired. As well as this, her body would feel as heavy as lead. Ayase had experienced such symptoms in the past, namely when she had been institutionalized at Arkart Medical. Back then, her head had constantly been split apart by painful headaches, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, except for February 29th. It deprived her of all sleep and emotional stability. Those were the memories she did not want to resurface, the past she had sealed away, the memory of around 2 years ago. The events. And yet, her headache was causing them to flash into her mind once more. Oh. That was no mere mental hospital. In them, a dark room, its single window locked behind bars. Apart from the wall in which that window stood, the rest of the walls were covered with mirrors. Ayase had been placed in the center of the room, sat in a crude steel chair. She was wearing headgear with countless cables protruding from it. Her hands were tied to the back of the chair. Her head was locked in place, with her chin tilted slightly upward. Not another soul was present in the room. Thus, all that could be heard were the sounds of Ayase's labored breathing and the metal groans of the chair she sat upon. Saliva trickled down from the corners of her mouth, accompanied by moans akin to those of a beast. If anyone were to hear them, they would never have been able to guess that they would be coming from a girl as young as her. She was being tortured. Slow, methodical torture. One that made very, very little sound. The method only involved one single thing. Not even an action. A drop of water falling from above onto her forehead every 5 seconds on the exact same spot. That was all it took, and it would continue unrelentingly for 2 full days. The result? Ayase could think only of the drop that would fall next. Her senses were sharpened to their limits, and each time a drop fell onto her forehead, another hallucination would be born. One in which each and every nerve across her body was plucked out one by one. One in which the bones of her entire skeleton crumbled to dust. One in which her head was pierced by a long, sharp awl. One in which all the liquids within her body, including her blood, froze to ice. One in which the skin lining her entire body slowly rotted away before eventually peeling off. Assailed without end by these sensations, Ayase could no longer maintain her sanity. Returning to her senses, she breathed erratically as she tightly gripped the sheets lining the bed. Her body trembled as those dark memories of hers resurfaced in her mind. The nurse that had been in her room just a moment ago was already gone. Dinner time had just arrived at the hospital, and the clamorous sounds that came from it resounded from down the hall. Ayase tried to recall the words the nurse had spoken to her right before leaving. Was her headache really just a side effect of the drugs she was on? Or had it been caused by her hitting her head, perhaps? Or perhaps it was just a hallucination brought forth by her past memories. She was unable to come to a decisive conclusion. You know, I'm thinking it's probably a good thing that Takumi got out of the hospital as soon as he did. Wiping away the sweat that had ran down her forehead, Ayase called forth a smile laced with self-loathing.
構わないわ。今さ何をされたって。あれはあの神罰を耐え抜いたんだから。迷わない。私は。
Is it possible she was NoAH 1? Murmuring in perhaps delirium, Ayase soon became aware of a sound reverberating throughout the hall. The comforting sound of shoes stepping on the linoleum floor. It was certainly not being made by a nurse. And the sound of footsteps was heading right for the room she was in. Someone knocked on her door, and she sealed her lips tight.
失礼します。
That someone was but a single man. He'd come bringing gifts, namely, a large basket filled with all manner of fruits. She could recognize the man, which was far from a good sign. Thus, she stared at him with a dubious glare.
どうも。あ、別に怪しいもんじゃないっすよ。自分は。
知ってるわ。
The man was a detective at the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department. He had once shadowed Ayase, as she was originally a suspect for the New Gen case. The detective, relieved by her response, scratched his head. His demeanor was unendingly casual.
いやー、嬉しいっす。君みたいな美人に覚えててもらえて。記憶力いいんすね。
The detective moved closer to her bed.
Ayase briefly glanced at her D-sword leaning against the window. It lay just outside her reach.
今日はお見舞いに来たんすよ。
そうは思えないわ。目的は？
鋭いっすね。
The detective flinched very overtly, his reaction perhaps bordering on theatrical.
まあちょっと綾瀬ちゃんに聞きたいことがあって。あ、これよかったら食べてほしいっす。
The detective smiled innocently, presented the basket he had brought with him, then placed it at Ayase's feet without waiting for approval.
うまいっすよ。あと高かったと。
いらない。
まあそう言わずせっかく買ってきたんで、後でお母さんが来た時にでも切ってもらって。あ、しまった。綾瀬ちゃんはもう何年も両親に会ってないんだったっすね。
Despite the detective's insensitive remark, Ayase felt nothing in response to it. Her ties to her parents had been cut from a very young age. Her parents had a reputation to uphold, so a child that often caused problems like Ayase had been inconvenient to them, to say the least. Her only remaining contact with them was the wire transfer she received for her living expenses each month, though it could hardly be called that.
申し訳ないっす。
The detective apologized, bowing down hastily. Ayase had only just gotten over the shock caused by her flashback, so she was in no mood to speak with him. Nonetheless, she urged herself to talk all the same.
聞きたいことって何？アリバイ？
違うっすよ。それは前に散々聞いたし。もう綾瀬ちゃんの容疑は晴れたっす。君は白、真っ白。
目星はついたの？犯人の。
それは教えられないんすよ。捜査上の秘密っす。
匠。
秘密っす。
The detective smirked. He was attempting to laugh the question away. And yet, something unrefined could be seen through the cracks of that smile.
しかし西条くんは不思議な少年っすね。彼を見ていると殺人の容疑者にはとても見えない。もしあれで本当に犯人だったとしたら、まさに人の皮をかぶった悪魔っす。
まだ容疑者なのね、彼。
いや、そういうわけじゃないっすよ。
The detective casually denied it with a smile, putting Ayase's persistent questions to rest.
ああ、今の話誰にも言っちゃダメっすからね。情報漏洩すると上司に怒られるんすよ。まあ当然なんすけど、この前も先輩のとばっちりで怒られたばっかで。綾瀬ちゃんも一度会ってると思うんすけど、覚えてるかな。バンさんっていう髪がボサボサで武将髭生やしたおっさんでか。
Ayase did remember him. When she had been questioned, that older detective had been even more talkative than the younger one she was conversing with now. His way of speaking had been a lot more assertive as well.
あの人がすぐこのバカってどうなるんすよ。そのくせ自分は本来の捜査をせずに、なんだかわけのわからないことばっか調べてて、挙句の果てに自分まで無理やり付き合わされて、最近胃が痛いんすよね。いや、まあ根はいい人っすし、勘が異常に鋭い人で、過去にも難事件をいくつか解決に導いたらしいんすけどね。
その話をするためここに来たの？
Ayase interrupted the man, and his smile quickly soured.
ああ、いや、申し訳ないっす。つい愚痴入っちゃったっすね。今の話は全面的に内緒にしてほしいっす。諏訪守、一生のお願いっすよ。
それで？
一つ目は、なんであんなことを？
Despite his ambiguous phrasing, Ayase could tell that he was referring to her diving off the school rooftop.
もう何度も話したわ、他の刑事さんに。
邪神王グラジオールの復活を阻止するためですか？
死ぬつもりなんてなかった。魂を一つ上のステージに持っていこうとしただけよ。
例の若者の間で話題になった君の歌についても似たようなことを言ってたっすよね。
And that was the second question he had for her. Ayase let out a faint sigh.
ニュージェネのことを歌ったものなんかじゃないわ、あの詩は。グラジオール記黙示録詩編のインスピレーションを受けて作った第3章102節よ。
Well, that's an obsessive knowledge. The Gladiole Book of Psalms and Revelation. Fictional. A high fantasy novel based on the Eastern European myth of Gladiole, the wicked-hearted king. With the saga in its entirety being told over the course of 23 volumes, it depicts the battle between the 7 Black Knights and Gladiole. It was written by R.C.O. Siegler from 1929 to set to 1951. The series has been translated into several languages, but it never gained widespread appeal due to its rather esoteric writing style. Siegler's other works related to the Gladiole mythos include the Gladiole Book of Kings and Wicked Hearts, Apostolic Letter, and more. All of these works are collectively referred to as the Gladiole Saga.
世界に邪神王グラジオールが現れようとしている。復活を阻止するにはグラジオールが流した黒い血によって作られた7つの杭が必要。
7 stakes.
杭は剣へと形を変え、神罰を乗り越えた7人の黒騎士の手に渡る。
Who withstood divine punishment itself, aka being broken, I assume.
目には目を、歯には歯を。邪神を背負いし人間だけが邪神王を滅ぼせるの。
Yep.
なんか映画みたいっすね。そういう壮大な設定は好きっす。
Ayase glared at the detective in response to his comment.
設定じゃないわ、現実よ。
じゃあ最後の質問っす。
The detective casually brushed away Ayase's objection, as she was all too used to this form of dismissal by now. Not a single person she had told this story to thus far had believed it.
君や西条くんの他にも水明の生徒について何人か洗ったんすけどね。
The detective mumbled to himself as he folded his arms. This was very obviously another act of theatrics, and Ayase had no intention of commenting on it.
何？
すごくバカバカしい質問なんすけど、刑事が質問するようなことじゃないんすよね、本当は。子供じみてるっていうか。
そう、質問する気がないなら出て行って。頭が痛いの。
ああ、いや、実はね、バンさんが妙なことを言い出してるんですよ。君たちは魔法使いなんじゃないかって。
Upon hearing that the subject of that remark was plural, Ayase raised her eyebrows in suspicion.
違いますよね。
使えるわ。
As she replied, Ayase's line of sight was directed not toward the man, but toward her hand that lay atop her bed sheets.
綾瀬ちゃんって面白い子っすね。
でもニュージェネはグラジオールの騎士と無関係。
はあ、そうっすか。まあどうでもいいんすけどね。
The detective, completely disinterested in what Ayase had just said, brushed off her words once again, then began to stretch. Sorry, Suwa, but you kind of suck at your job. The moment he did so, a digital sound suddenly cut through the silence of the room. The detective, surprised by this interruption, reached into the pocket of his suit and took out his cell phone.
まずった病院って携帯禁止なんですよね。いやオフにしておくの忘れてた。
Man, you've got a loud ringtone.
うわしかも女からだし。付き合って4年になるラブラブの彼女がいるんですよ。
He turned his phone off with a grin, forcing the caller to hang up. He then turned to Ayase once more.
綾瀬ちゃんは映画見るっすか？スパークウォーズって知らない？それに出てくるダース・スパイダー伯爵のテーマなんす。今のメロディー。
Ayase had no interest in movies, nor anything of the sort. Having long since decided that she had no obligation to further entertain the detective's questioning, she returned to gazing silently outside the window.
実は自分スパークウォーズオタクなんすよ。あ、興味ないっすか？そりゃ失礼したっす。じゃ、自分はこれで。
With that, the detective concluded the conversation with which he had no partner, then left the hospital room. Ayase did not even turn around to watch him go. With the man gone, all that reflected in her eyes was the twilight sky slowly turning indigo. Woo! That is some brightness.
ボケなす。ずっと待ってた。待ってたんだからね。あなたのことなんか大嫌い。でも大好き。
I stared in a daze. Whoops. I stared in a daze at Seraton as she moved around the monitor. The final episode of Bloodtune had aired deep into last night. The story was gradually getting more and more intense, and the ep had received particularly high praise on that channel. This was the third time I've seen it, but none of it was really sticking with me. I checked the time and saw that it was past 10 p.m. Remy had left at about 8. While she'd been here, she encouraged my depressed self in many ways, and she'd said so many nice things to me. Thanks to her being by my side, I felt less lonely today than the entire week prior. That being said, Remy still wasn't taking the situation all that seriously. It felt almost like she was avoiding talking about New Gen entirely. Maybe she was just done with it. With me. Her friend had been hurt in the earthquake, and it sounded like she already had a lot on her plate with just that. She probably just didn't have any room left to bother with me and my problems. But the issue with that was... While yes, I was probably way too paranoid, there was no doubt that this was a genuinely dangerous situation. I could be killed today, even. Shogun had been coming after me all this time. Persistent didn't even begin to cover it. If I could just understand what he was doing or why he was doing it, then I could work out some countermeasures.
そういえば、あのおじさん、別れ際にこんなこと言ってたのら。中でも一番特別なのは、その目、誰の目を産み落とした少年。
Whose eyes are those eyes? You could hear those words all over Shibuya by now. On the net, it becomes synonymous with the culprit. It was a phrase I used pretty often for a really long time. It was without a doubt a message from Shogun, who knew that. Either that or an intentional way of provoking me. When I had first started using that phrase, it felt like someone had taught it to me. When had I? I vaguely remembered the first time I used it. It was an essay I'd written back in elementary school. The title was that very same phrase. Whose eyes are those eyes? I'd almost completely forgotten what I'd actually written in it. I wanted to check now. What had I written in that essay? It was probably stored at my parents' place, though I had a feeling they might have thrown the old thing away by now. Then again, when it came to things that were pretty important to me as a kid, I did have a habit of storing them in a big empty candy tin I'd used to call my treasure box. The essay could potentially have been in there. What to do? Should I go to my parents? But I didn't want to show my face to Nanami. I wouldn't know what to say.
僕はどうしようもなくヘタレだ。
I sluggishly rose from my seat, then collapsed onto the sofa.
あなたなんでここにいんの？これは違うんだからね。私は別にさ、立ち食いそばが好物なわけじゃないさ。何ニヤニヤしてんの？このボケナス。もう怒った。うなれ！侍コンデンサー！
Lying face up, I gazed at the ceiling while ignoring Sato's protesting. That dreary, bare steel ceiling. Unlike my room at my parents' house, there wasn't a single groove in the ceiling that looked like a person's face. Suddenly, in the corner of my vision, I noticed a familiar tin sitting by the eroge packages piled up on my loft bed.
あれって。
I hurriedly stood up and climbed the ladder to get a closer look. It was a reddish-brown rectangular tin, about the size of a B5 piece of paper. The word shortbread was written on the lid in white letters. There was no mistaking it. It was my treasure box. I must have brought it from my parents' place, though I definitely didn't remember doing so. GJ me, always thinking ahead. I quickly grabbed the tin and opened the lid. Inside were a few test answer sheets, essays, scraps of paper torn out from sketchbooks, and so on. It was mostly all paper, but there were still a couple small objects in there. I took all the pages from the tin at once, then began flipping through them for my target. It didn't take long to find. After all, it was at the very top. Whose eyes are those eyes? By Nishijo Takumi, Class 4-3. The essay paper had faded in color. The handwriting, not even a mother could call it good. Mother! Could this essay be hiding some kind of important secret? Something Shogun was particularly exploiting? Something that had to do with why the homeless man had referred to me as the most special? With a gulp, I began to read it one word at a time, being careful not to overlook anything. Whose eyes are those eyes? Nishijo Takumi, Class 4-3. I dream a lot. In my dreams, older me visits me in a time machine. He doesn't look like me at all. His time machine has a lot of buttons. I think if you push one, a shower or some shampoo or something comes out. I asked older me how it works, and he said you could go see dinosaurs or even go back to when cavemen were around. He asked me what I'm bad at in school, and I said I'm bad at math. He told me there was a switch that would make me really good at math. I tried to push it once, but he got mad. He said I had to work hard and get better by myself. That was the only time he got mad at me. After he stopped being mad at me, he was super nice to me, so I was so happy. He told me about the girl I was gonna marry. That's a secret. I asked him about God. He told me God is real. I think he's real too. My mom said God is always watching. It'll make you go to hell if you do bad things. So I can absolutely never do bad things. I have to be nice to my little sister too. Mom told me God doesn't watch you do bad things, but that it's a scary man instead. The scary man is the whose eyes are those eyes monster. He makes you go to hell if he sees you. God's eyes and whose eyes are those eyes are in the sky, the ceiling, the walls, and there's a lot of them in my school now, and they're watching me no matter what. So I think I have to do a lot of good things like studying and other stuff because of that. It's embarrassing though because they watch me even when I do things like go to the toilet or take a bath. Also, ever since I was little, I could close my eyes and dream sometimes even though I wasn't sleeping. It was like the inside of my head was like a video game or manga. But when I do that, the whose eyes are those eyes monster comes out, so I don't want to do that. I asked my mom and she told me not to do it. But while I'm writing this essay, I asked older me in my dreams to tell me more about the time machine, but he said I knew everything. He wouldn't tell me more stuff because I'm just a kid. So from now on, I want to do lots of good things so I can beat whose eyes are those eyes. The end.
なんだかよくわからないな。
This would have been around the time when I first started feeling God's gaze. Maybe I was going through some sort of phase back then? Either way, trying to understand anything from this extremely cryptic essay was beyond impossible. It felt like it'd be easier to decipher a bunch of hieroglyphs than it would be trying to figure out what the hell I'd been talking about. As I thought that, I noticed something was scribbled on the back of the page. Come to think of it, hadn't I loved doodling back then? Yeah, like in my social studies textbooks, the pictures of historic figures would always have mustaches or sunglasses drawn on them, and my notebooks would always have flipbook-esque animations drawn in the corners. Back then, I'd started enjoying drawing more and more, to the point where I'd even gotten my parents to buy me a sketchbook. Although, to clarify, it wasn't like my drawings were anything to write home about. Immersing myself in nostalgia, I turned the essay over to check out what I'd scribbled on it. Oh. LR2. Or IR2. Fun. The whose eyes are those eyes monster, I assume. 8 arms. Something written on its belly. Could this be Gladiol? But while it was definitely incomprehensible, there was still something familiar about it. Something I'd seen recently.
IR2
Yeah, IR2. Whether it was a mathematical formula that had some other kind of meaning, or was just a meaningless string of numbers and letters, I had no idea. Fun
fun to the power of 10 times int to the power of 10 equals IR2. But, yep. Oh, int times 4, int to the power of 40. Yeah, that's why it sounded familiar. This formula, it was the exact same one Shogun had posted out of nowhere, back when he'd first come in contact with me in the chat room. Whose eyes are those eyes? And IR2. Whoops, sorry. 2 key things that had come from the essay I'd written many years ago. Things that even I myself had forgotten. And if Shogun knew them, then that would mean that he's been reading my mind after all. Whoosh! Whoosh! Within the Frisia reception room, or rather, the narrow space partitioned off by a few shelves being used as one, Bond sat deep in concentration, scanning through a number of files. Opposite to him sat Yua, huddled up and making herself small. She'd been taking frequent glances at Bond in an attempt to read his expression. From an outsider's perspective, it appeared almost like a child showing their parent their report card. Bond was currently reading the report of everything Yua had investigated concerning the new gen cases and Nishijo Takumi. It also included the chat log between Takumi and Shogun from the day prior to the crucifixion case. As a result of her findings, Yua had concluded that Takumi was undoubtedly the true culprit behind the new gen cases.
すごいわね。これ全部一人で調べたの？
はい、一応。
Yua hung her head apologetically in response to Momose's praise. She stared at the Gero froggy straps hanging from the bag below her feet. She was speaking with a detective and the boss of an investigation firm. In terms of investigating, they were as professional as one could get. Compared to their prowess, information gathered by the investigation of an ordinary high school girl would be akin to childish scribblings. And yet, despite the supposed gap, Bond and Momose found themselves both impressed by the quality of the report.
なかなかいい着眼点だ。よく調べたな。とりわけこの西条匠の多重性ってのが興味深い。西条匠は多重人格であり、オリジナルとなった西条匠の人格が眠っている時、つまり他の人格が活動中に事件を起こしている。本当に面白いわ。まあでもちょっとばかり現実離れしすぎてるかな。
刑事さんはその西条くんのこと犯人だって考えてないんですか？
はっきり言っていいかい？
Her face stiffened, but after a moment, Yua nodded.
警察じゃ西条匠は容疑者として見ていない。
へえ、そうなの。
Not just Yua, but Momose gaped in amazement as well. A wry smile formed on Bond's lips. He leaned back in his seat and rested the back of his head in his hands.
少なくとも貼り付け事件じゃ西条は白だ。遺体を貼り付けていた杭には指紋がべったり付着しててな。
Oh no.
西条の指紋を手に入れて照合してみたんだが、全く合致しなかった。
Yua was turning paler by the second. Her lips trembled. Now that everything she had believed in had collapsed beneath her feet, feelings of guilt at the awful things she had said to Takumi encroached upon her heart.
杭にあった指紋から容疑者についてはほぼ固まってんだ。まだマスコミにも公表してないけどな。ちなみにそれ、諏訪のお手柄だったりする。
スワちゃんは頑張ってるっていうのに、バンちゃんはよくここでのんびりしていられるわね。
実は俺、捜査本部から外されたんだわ。
はあ。
本来の捜査サボって G レートのこととか調べてんの上司にバレちゃってな。
This was the reason why his subordinate, Suwa, had been the one to inform him of the seventh incident. There had been no reason for anyone else to call an investigator that was no longer working on the case.
あんたね、もっとうまく立ち回りなさいよ。まあバンちゃんに G レートのことを教えた私にも責任はあるけど。
気にすんなって。それに G レートの件は個人的にも気になってたんだ。まあ西条にしても貼り付け以外の事件じゃまだ捜査線上にいる。もしかするとユアちゃんの推理が正しいかもしれん。
ニュージェネは同一犯による連続殺人事件じゃないって警察は考えてるの？
まだなんとも。ただついさっき第7の事件が起きたようだしな。個人的には犯人は複数いると思ってる。
I mean, yeah, I'm kind of the opinion too that it's probably multiple people.
いろいろ喋っちまった。口外したって知られたらクビになっちまう。今のはオフレコな。
Bond playfully placed his forefinger on his lip.
で、本題なんだが。
Having thought that her report had been the reason she had been summoned, Yua tilted her head in puzzlement.
聞きたいことってのは学校のことなんだよ。ユアちゃんは青井瀬名って子を知ってるかい？君の同級生のはずなんだが。
After pondering for a moment, Yua shook her head apologetically.
名前は聞いたことがあるような気がしますけど、話したことはありません。
ああ、そうか。
その人が犯人なんですか？
ああ、全くの別件だ。昨日徹夜したのもその子のこと調べてたからでな。
あんたさっき女子高生の生態がどうとかって。
Wamose, ever perplexed, received a wink and a grin from Bond before he turned back toward Yua.
例えば学校でものすごい手品を使う女生徒がいるって噂を聞いたことは？
いえ、ありませんけど。
さっぱり話が見えないわね。何のこと？
例えば何もない空間から剣を取り出すような手品とか。
Yua's head snapped upward. Her expression was one of blatant astonishment. She knows something about D-swords.
どうしてそれ？
Despite being the one to ask the question, Bond also had a look of surprise on his face.
心当たりがあるのかい？
Yua hesitated, then, after a moment, nodded resolutely.
どこで見た？
駅の近くの地下道です。西条くんと岸本さんが。
Oh, she did find them after all.
フェスだな。それで
Yua briefly recounted her dramatic pursuit from around 2 weeks prior. How she had gone to a manga cafe to meet Nishijo Takumi. How she had been a little forceful when talking to him, causing him to flee. How she had frantically chased him around Shibuya. How he had then managed to evade her, and how right when she was about to give up, she had stumbled upon Takumi and Ayase entering the underpass.
だから私、その階段の上から二人の様子をこっそり伺っていたんです。
She can see the sword, which means she's a gigolomaniac.
二人は階段の一番下で何か話していて。
Oh yeah,
どんな
I've
ことを話していたかは聞き取れなかったんですけど。
actually now it doesn't necessarily mean that Bond is a gigalomaniac because it seems like Senna real booted her sword. Ugh.
そしたら突然岸本さんが剣を何もないところから取り出したんです。すごく大きな剣でバッグにも入らないような。
She was showing it to a fellow gigalomaniac, so she had no reason to real boot it, I assume. Plus, Suwa didn't seem to react to its presence whatsoever in her hospital room, so...
まさか。
俺が見たのと同じだ。
え、
俺が見たのは岸本じゃなかった。さっき名前を出した青井瀬名っていう少女だ。実は葵が剣を振り回してたっていう目撃証言が渋谷のあちこちから出てる。
その手品、渋谷の若い子たちの間で流行ってるのかしら。
でも私が見たあれは手品にはとても見えませんでした。それに
他にも何か見たの？
信じてもらえるかどうかわからなくて、誰にも話したことはないんですけど、あの時岸本さんは剣を出しただけじゃなくて。
Yua's words faltered, and she slowly licked her lips. She looked lost on whether or not she should continue. Her eyes darted around the room. But eventually, she steeled her resolve and fixed her gaze upon Bond.
二人に分身したんです。
Twins, 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 twins!
まるで本当にその場に二人いるみたいでした。私、わけがわからなくて。
Could it be that she accidentally made a twin, and then once that twin died, the delusion ended from her parents? Like they still had the delusion that she was they still had the delusion that Mia was their daughter, but once Mia, like about 24 hours after Mia died, the delusion ended for them and they no longer had that sadness. A heavy silence covered the reception room. All three within it were at a complete loss for words.
とにかく一体どんな種があるのかわかんねえが、そんな手品みてえな真似ができる連中がこの渋谷には何人かいるらしい。まあそれと岸本綾瀬の青井瀬名も西条匠と接触したことは確認済みだ。これが偶然とは思えねえわけよ。
西条くん、
あの少年の周囲ではどうも現実離れしたことばかりが起きてるような気がする。
As Bond said that, his words from the call before reappeared in his mind.
怪獣か魔法使いで済ませられるならよっぽどいいけどね。
Bond's murmur did not reach the other two. Averse to this gloomy atmosphere, Melmose took a breath and sipped on the tea her subordinate had brought over to her. Then, as she brought the cup back down, she put on a smile and unceremoniously made to change the topic.
ところでゆあちゃん、そのカバンにぶら下がってるカエル、最近流行ってるんでしょ？
あ、はい。
How many are there? How many? Yua gave a sigh of relief, having been saved by the kind company president.
なんて言うんだっけ？
ゲロカエルです。
How many are there?
いろいろ種類が出てるんじゃなかった？10種類ぐら
How
い。
many are there?
はい。私はその友達からもらっただけなので詳しくは知らないんですけど。
A friend.
なんだってこんな手抜き商品が流行るんだろうな。見た目だって俺の方がずっと可愛いぞ。
I'd get a Bond keychain.
バンちゃん、寝言は寝てから言いなさい。
冗談だって。
私も実はどうして流行っているのかよくわからないんです。
あら、結構可愛いと思うけどね。
ももちゃんの見る目も衰えたな。
世論は私の方が正しいって証明してるじゃない。バンちゃんも買いに行った方がいいわよ。
一体どこへ行けば買えるものなんだ？
ゲロカエルの専門ショップがあちこちにあって。
Why do I feel like there's gonna be some sinister twist about Garo Froggies?
専門ショップだ？
Wait, it's because of this ambience, isn't it?
そこで金曜日に行列に並べば買えると思います。
金曜日？
毎週金曜日に
Friday.
新しいデザインのものが発売になるんです。好きな子はコンプリートとか言って全部集めてるみたいで。
The GE rates. GE rates. Ghetto. Oh. Oh no. Oh no. Are the Garo Froggies like created by the Nozomi Corporation or something? Is that why there was one on the desk? Maybe it wasn't that somebody left it there, but just that it was a random spare or something. Are Garo Froggies causing earthquakes? While Yua was in the midst of speaking, Bon had turned to Momose while scratching the stubble on his chin.
金曜。
Yeah, I think Bon may be thinking what I'm thinking too.
流行るとは思えないものが流行ってて。G レートは毎週末に上昇する。
GERO.
まさかバンちゃん。
I cannot believe that Garo Froggies are plot relevant and may have killed over 100 people. Oh my gosh. That emote of Garo Froggy with a gun has taken on a whole new meaning.
当たってみる価値はあるかもな。
You better start doing a citywide confiscation of all Garo Froggy merch. Okay. Yeah, yeah, probably a good place to stop for now. But, some interesting little, tidbits here now. Some food for thought. I will continue tomorrow. So, have a good one, guys.